And as you as always, the QR code should be visible in your screen, and this QR code will continue to reappear throughout the duration of this course. Okay, now a few things. There are a few things that I forgot to mention at the beginning at the beginning of our at the beginning of this unit. So before we go on, there are a few housekeeping rules or that that we should that we should adhere to for sessions such as this, live synchronous sessions where we meet virtually, of course. I'd like everybody who is not speaking to mute your mic upon joining, unless instructed otherwise. Please do turn on your camera if your bandwidth allows you to do so. Since you have your camera on, please dress appropriately for class. I know we are now working, we are now studying from home, but that doesn't mean that we can lower our standards of decency. If you have any questions or if you'd like to interact during class, then please use the raise hand feature unless otherwise instructed. And like we did a few weeks ago, as you know, other interactive means may be used, such as live polls and surveys. For asynchronous sessions, as before, we may ask you, sorry, Pak Rudi and I may ask you to engage in online discussion activities using either Padlet or Flipgrid. You both have used the tools. You've used them nicely. And then I'd like to introduce you to a feature that I've added in our virtual classroom, ITS classroom, which is the Q&A, link. The Q&A link is located just underneath the introduction section of the course. When you open that, it'll open a new tab or new page, which will take you to the Q&A platform where you can post your questions, any questions regarding the course contents or the management and the running of this course. So if you have any questions, and we happen to be in a non-synchronous session where we don't meet virtually like this, then please send through your questions there, and we will respond within 24 hours or so through the announcements section in the class. Then there are independent learning sessions outside of class hours where you'd be asked to access course materials as instructed. You may be asked to search for additional or supplemental references. And as with the above point, if you have any questions, you can deliver them through the Q&A. I'll take you through. I'll give you a virtual tour of the feature a little later on. now that we've got the house, now that we've got the housekeeping rules out of the way, there is one event that I'd like to um, bring to your attention. Now, a few days ago, Buduli and I were talking about organizing organizing a guest lecture event, um, inviting Professor Hitoshi Nakamura from Shibaura Institute of Technology, or SIT, Japan. He has a wonderful portfolio, a strong research interest in urban planning and urban regional planning issues, and hopefully this public lecture session will be held on December 9th, 2020. I put an asterisk there because it is still to be confirmed. Why? Because Buruli just brought to my attention earlier today that on December 9th we will have the mayoral election. So Surabaya is going to choose a new mayor on December 9th. So I don't know how that's going to go. I'll have to talk to her about it, and I'll update you all. Um, I'll give you an updated information on the event as soon as we have everything pat down and confirmed, either through the announcement, or I'll probably ask Hata for his help to distribute the information. Now, I'd like to do something different with this public or this guest lecture session. I want to tie it in with the semester evaluation. Your task in preparation for this guest lecture is to prepare a question or two for Professor Nakamura. Then, of course, join his lecture, sit in, listen to what he has to say, and then you deliver your question when the opportunity arises. There are a few ways that you can prepare, that can help you prepare your question for Professor Nakamura. The first way is to access his profile and then go to his list of publications. Have a look through his publication list and see if there's any publications that interest you, and then have a read through it, and generate questions or comments from there. I'm sure he would appreciate any constructive feedback, any comments, any questions regarding his work. Another way of preparing your question, don't forget your Padlet posts. I've seen a lot of wonderful posts there on topics regarding housing, land use planning and urban economics, land use planning and society, traffic, and so on. You can use those posts as resources to generate some questions, some comments to Professor Nakamura, rather than having to sit down and listen and taking notes. You can do that, but I would suggest that you use those two methods, or either of those two methods, to generate your questions. I'm sure that it will yield better quality questions, better quality results than when you sit down and do it or prepare your questions during that time. Now, if you'd like to prepare now, when you prepare your questions for Professor Nakamura, I'd like you to use the question and answer link in Classroom. And so whenever and if you see that your colleagues, if you see that your peers have the same or similar question to yours, you can upvote that question rather than posting a similar or rather than posting a similar question over and over again. So that's why I'll give you guys a virtual tour of the feature a little later on, because I think it's a crucial and it's a very useful feature to have in our classroom. So moving on. Last week, as I mentioned, there was a we had an asynchronous session where I asked you to read chapters by Sadio Hutomo and by Pak Aris on land development or land use issues or land management issues. Pak Mulyono Sadio Hutomo, he wrote a chapter on land administration and how that aspect, the administrative aspect of land management or land administration, is generally overlooked. People generally don't think twice about land administration or or the administrative aspects of land management. We all like to think that administrative things are just paperwork that we have to get rid of. So why should land administration be any different? Pak Aris wrote on vacant land, namely abandoned plots of land in the city or in a region. And he highlighted a few key points that that I'll go through a bit later on. And then I asked you to collect case studies and engage in an online discussion. Yes, I've collected your posts. I've seen your posts. I haven't had the chance to read through them, all of them yet. I've read a few. I've done a few. I skimmed through a few. I've added an online discussion guidelines. I've uploaded that file to Classroom, and some of you seem to have read through and followed the guidelines. Others have not. So in preparation for the guest lecture, I'd like you to reread the online discussion guidelines and please follow through because that will, as I mentioned, I would like to tie it in. I would like to tie in this activity and the guest lecture with the semester, with a portion of the semester evaluation. Okay, so one of the chapters that you read was by Mulyono, Pak Mulyono Sadio Hutomo, who is a lecturer at who is currently, I think he's still actively lecturing at the Adibuana University. He lectures urban and regional planning as well. So he highlighted in the chapter that he wrote, he highlighted the scope of administrative aspects or administrative tasks in land use planning and land use development or land development. And then he defined and explained what land titling is and the different kinds of land rights. And then he, I think this is the fourth section that I'm about to mention here, is what I think is the highlight of his chapter, which is land administration and its role in spatial planning. So he listed, Satya Hutomo listed several administrative tasks or roles, such as resource inventory. So land administration, it's beyond just paperwork. It is one of it is about resource inventory. It tells you it describes or it tells you how much land you have, and the status of those lands and everything. And it is in fact one of the primary inputs or one of the primary considerations in spatial planning. And then it 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 exercises or it highlights land rights, or it translates land rights and regulations, and it's an instrument of control. Other roles include conflict management and resolution, land use management, distribution and redistribution, which reflects fairness and justice in planning, land consolidation. Land administration can also be a tool for community empowerment. Um, and it is a part of the land provision and land development process in, 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 in spatial development. And it's a mechanism for taxation. If you'd like to, I won't go into the details. I suggest that you reread the article if you'd like to get to know more about how these tasks or these activities play into spatial planning. And the next chapter is, of course, one by none other than our own Aris. He discussed how a vacant land or an abandoned lot came into being. How did it happen? How did it end up being an abandoned lot? How did it end up being in a vacant land? And he also highlighted the urgency in addressing those abandoned lots. Why should we care about abandoned lots? Why should we care about vacant land? So, and like Satya Hutomo, he also highlighted, he proposed some solutions through administrative, economic, and legal instruments to deal with several vacant or abandoned lot issues. Now, he wrote that some of the issues pertaining to vacant lots or abandoned lots are caused by profiteering, and some are also caused by certain development setbacks. Profiteering, there's nothing wrong with profiteering, of course, but sometimes the act of speculating and the act of investing in land may impede or may hold back some development goals. So you can read how these administrative economic, and legal instruments are implemented in the table and in the chapter, which is also available in Classroom. Now, about the responses that I received in the online discussion activity. I would say the responses that we received, I wouldn't say I received, that we received have been excellent. You highlighted case studies from abroad. Some case studies are from our own backyard, and I'd rather think it's excellent. In a nutshell, these are the responses that we received. the most popular theme, I've sorry, before getting into the numbers, I categorized the responses that we received into several themes: environment, housing, management, society, traffic, urban economics, and vacant or abandoned lots. Um, I think it's clear from the donut graph that we see before us that land use, uh, land use issues, land development issues, and the environment is clearly a winner, a winning theme here. It's the most popular theme that you addressed. The second most popular is traffic, and I think that land use and traffic and the environment have a very strong link or a very strong connection. And then the other third most popular, urban economics and housing, and then other posts highlighted land use management um, and management, abandoned or vacant lots, and land use in the society. So awesome. As I mentioned, I haven't had the chance to look through them in detail. I'd really love to be able to respond directly to those posts soon. Um, some of those posts, some of those responses that you posted come with attachments. Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. Others have no attachments to them. It'd be awesome if you can at least provide a link to the source that you were citing, or that became the source, resources or references that became the source of your inspiration to generate the post. That would be greatly appreciated. Right. Now, environment and traffic are two of the most popular topics. And I think since they have a very strong, since these two topics are very strongly interlinked, and I think throughout the next few sections, next few slides, I'd like to hopefully be able to explain how land use can affect these things. So this brings me to land suitability analysis. This is one way as I mentioned, I think in a couple of weeks ago, I said that land use planning, or spatial planning, is a form of intervention. It's a form of, or in the words of our own, in the words of the Indonesian government, land use planning is an instrument of is an instrument of control, and control. So how do they control it? They do so in none other than conducting land suitability analysis. Now, the framework for conducting or for carrying out land suitability analysis is you can find that in the ministerial regulations, Ministry of Public Works, number 20, 2007. The last time I checked, this regulation or this framework is still valid. You can also double check. You can also double check its validity by clicking on the word valid. It's hyperlinked. It's hyperlinked to the Public Works website. And wait, where you can see that it's still we're still using this framework today. Now, to determine whether a piece of land or a plot of land is suitable for development, we have to look at least three things. Its physical traits or physical characteristics, um, any economic characteristics or any economic activities that is currently conducted there, and its socio-cultural aspects, socio-cultural meaning, the socio-cultural meaning and the demographics of the people that inhabit that area, so to say, if there are any. The framework, more or less, looks like this. So it details. I think you can divide this framework into one, two, three to four different phases. The first phase being data collection, of course. There are several datas. This particular column that I highlighted in blue details the items of the data that needs to be collected to conduct the analysis. And then once the data is collected, you can then move on to an analysis of its carrying capacity, so to say, whether that just to be able to see what can you do on that plot of land, what can you do there, and so on. And then once you've carried out the carrying capacity analysis, then you conduct a land suitability analysis. From this land suitability analysis, you will then generate recommendations on what you can do there, what is suitable, what that land is, what type of development is that land suitable for, and so on. And so we'll have a look at these four sections one at a time. Let's start with data collection on the physical traits or physical characteristics of the area or of the plot of land that you are going to develop. Some of the characteristics, or because the first stage in this four-stage process is the data collection. Here are the aspects, or here are the data that you need to collect before you can start doing your analysis. Data includes data on climate, data climatology, on the topography and the geology and hydrology, or the availability of water, surface water, groundwater in the area, and if now point number 5 is mineral resources, if there are any potentials for mining, if there are any particular ores, minerals that can be extracted, and so on. And then, of course, natural hazards. What sort of threats are there? And point number 7 is land use, or existing land use. What is it used for? What is it currently used for? You ideally you should also collect um, findings from other studies or other research that's been done on that area and that on that particular area for development. Um, and point number 9, to bolster that, to bolster point number 8 is any other relevant regulations and policies that are in place um, pertaining or regarding that particular area of development. Now, we have, as I mentioned in our previous session, that we have a national framework for planning, and then this national framework gets translated into a provincial and then into a more local scale, development framework. And because of this hierarchy, we do have different regulations and different policies that apply to different areas, to different strategic areas, and so on. So that's why it is important. It is important that you also collect, that you also research and collect any relevant regulations and policies, especially if you're doing a very localized development, such as in a kelurahan or in a kecamatan scale, so a sub-district or a district scale, because district scales are subject to the city or regency regulations, and the city regulations are subject to the higher regulations and so on. Now, for climate, I only mentioned rainfall, the number of rainy days, and rain intensity in the table. However, there are other aspects that you need to look out for in climate, which is, of course, average temperature, relative humidity, wind speed and direction, and sun exposure duration. In 24 hours, how many hours does the sun shine on that particular area? Now, it may sound a bit what, but if you were plotting a piece of land for agricultural development, then these climate data would make perfect sense. For any other developments, maybe 1 or 2 out of these 7 points are not too relevant, and you can leave that out. So all the data that you've collected are ideally put into a map. Now, over the next few slides, I've got some sample maps to show you of what these data could be or could look like when you visualize them. This is a topographical map. Now I'll use the same area. I'll use the same area as an illustration, just to show you that how a particular area can look when viewed from different lenses. And this is a topographical map showing the different elevations in relative to the sea level from zero, or exactly level with the sea, up to 3,000 meters. And this just shows the different elevations that are in the area, and the topographical map can then be translated if you have slope data into the morphological map. And you can identify which ones are the flatlands and which ones are slopes. And this would definitely help if you happen to have, this would definitely help you in identifying if you, for example, if you're erecting a high-rise building, such maps or such data is very helpful in helping you determine the sort of construction, the sort of foundations, the sort of building materials that you use um, in response to the to the slope. This is a slope map showing the different the different how do you say this? The different elevations. Sorry, the differences in elevation. So between 15 to 25%, which is quite steep. 8 to 15%, which is not too steep. It's still quite steep. 8 to 15, and which ones are 0 to 8%. I think all the other I think all the rest of the areas outside this colorful region is relatively flat. So this is a sample of the geological map. As I mentioned before, one of the many data that you need to collect to determine land suitability is a geological map. Now, if you have a large area such as this, if you're dealing with such a large area, then sometimes, well, it makes sense. It makes sense to get or to generate or to get a geological map. Other times, if you're dealing with a smaller area, for example, if you're just dealing with this plot of land, it may not make sense. It might not make sense to have a geological map. You just mentioned that the particular area has alluvium or has sediments or is composed of volcanic rocks, for example. You might not need to generate a map. So this again really depends on the scale of development that you're doing and the requirements and the requirements of the job. This is a geological map that shows this particular area that we're using as an illustration. Has at least three different types of soil or ground cover, or not ground cover. Ground cover is on the surface, but three different types of soil or rocks. So we have alluvial soil, and then we have sediments, and the rest of the area, which is green, are made of volcanic deposits. This is the surface geological map. What's the difference with the previous map? You may ask. Well, this is more of a general illustration of what's inside, what's underground, and this is a more detailed composition of what's on the surface. Different types of minerals, andesol, alluvial, and so on. I'm not a geologist, so I don't know much about each category. But I'm just here to illustrate that I'm just here to introduce you to this sort of map that helps illustrate what's going on in an area of development and what's going on underneath the surface. Other things that pertain to hydrology. This is a map of different rivers and canals of this particular area. These are the these are the administrative borders of the area, and the blue lines represent the different rivers and the different canals that flow in and out of the region. And this map, which strongly correlates, I suppose, strongly correlates with the previous map, illustrates potential groundwater deposits where the orange parts in the map says that there are absolutely no groundwater, and then groundwater. This is the green ones are the deep groundwaters, and the purple ones are the more shallow, and more easily accessible, I suppose, groundwater. The iso-Phreatis map. I don't really see this map a lot. I think it's almost like a contour map, but I think it just shows the different levels of water surface or groundwater availability. And then this is the potential mineral resources map. As you can see here, some plots part of the area may have or may contain gold deposits, iron ore, and the Surabaya, something, and this may and this is earth or soil deposits where you might use it as you can dig it up. You might be able to establish a quarry there to dig up and use the soil for reclamation projects, for example. So again, this sort of mineral resources map may or may not be relevant, depending on the scope of planning that you're doing, and depending on the region itself. Then, of course, natural hazards. This map identifies or illustrates the different threats that are common, that commonly impact the area, and it helps illustrates where these hazards are. So we have a volcanically active area here, and then we have perhaps lava runoff should the volcano decide to erupt, and then we can also the natural hazards. Other natural hazards are inundation, the green ones here, and then of course all these other areas, the purple areas here, indicate that this is a safe area, perhaps safe enough for development. And then this is a sample of an existing land use map. If you happen to be developing a vacant lot or a vacant plot of land, then you might think, oh, nothing's going on here. But if you cross check it with government or legal documents, then you might find out that, oh, hang on, actually, this particular area has been designated for a certain purpose. Here here we have the red nodes and the yellow nodes or yellow blobs, red blobs that indicate these are settlement areas. Um, Rural settlements are represented in yellow. Urban settlements are represented in red. Some are protected areas. The green ones are protected areas, and then the lighter green um, are areas for cultivation or areas for development. The and all the others are embankments or ponds for fisheries and for agricultural activities. Now, once you've collected all that data, once you've represent, perhaps even once you've represented, sorry, rewinding, once you've collected all the data, and once you've plotted them, or once you've represented them or translated them onto a map, then you can begin. Doing a carrying capacity analysis. Um, there are several considerations when you carry out this analysis. And actually, I'd like to introduce you to another term that is used in our planning framework. Loosely translated into English, it's the carrying capacity component. However, legal documents and planning documents refer them to as Satuan Kemampuan Lahan or SKL. And there are several SKL. There's morphology that you need to take into consideration, and this is an interesting component actually. Ease of execution or kemudahan pelaksanaan, ease of execution. So that's one thing that you need to take into consideration, whether this is feasible or whether this is doable or not. And then slope stability, foundational stability, the hydrological maps that you drew before can help illustrate water availability. It can all and the water maps and the slope maps can help you illustrate water runoff or drainage and identify any potential areas for erosion. Waste management here, waste management here refers to yes, waste management in general, but also refers to water runoff. So if you were depositing industrial waste, for example, if you were dumping industrial waste into the local waterways, where would the runoff be? So that's what waste management generally pertains to, and then of course natural hazards. And once you've conducted this analysis, once you've overlaid, that is, once you stacked one data on top of another, then you have an illustration of the area's carrying capacity. Which parts of the particular plot of land that you're going to develop is suitable for development, which ones are not suitable for development, and so on. And then this piece of new data that you've generated, the carrying capacity, this land carrying capacity data, is then taken to generate a land suitability analysis. Now, this these SKL, so to say, have different weights. So you calculate the carrying capacity, and you determine the carrying capacity depending on each component's weights. Um, the ministerial regulation or the guidelines for analysis state that um, state different weights are assigned. So assign different weights to each component, um, mostly on the physical characteristics of an area, um, the morphology, how it's shaped, slope stability, has the highest weight, 5. The availability of water, drainage and runoff, and natural hazards. You can see from the different weights assigned, um, out of these 9 components, which are more, I wouldn't say important. I'd say all of them are important to take into consideration, but which of these 9 components are more um, affects the direction of development more significantly, so to say. Land stability and erosion are not as important, I suppose. I think as long the possibilities of erosion happening would be minimized if you have slope stability and so on. I think, and then of course, ease of execution here is as the second second least um, important of all, despite it being explicitly stated in the document that you have to consider about the feasibility or the durability of a development in a particular piece of in a particular area, but it's not exactly the top priority. What's interesting is the waste management or waste deposits. It doesn't even have a weight. So I'm not sure if that's so. I think this weight is the different weights assigned to each component may warrant further investigation. But since this regulation was established in 2007, we've been using it until now. I don't think anybody has disputed this sort of weight assignment um, whatsoever. But you might find it interesting to see why um, why certain weights are assigned and so on. Now, the next piece, the next stage of this process is land suitability analysis. As with the previous stages, there are different components or different components to consider um, when when conducting a land suitability analysis. Um, we take the carrying capacity data that we've generated from the data collection stage and the carrying capacity analysis phase, and then we bring it into this land suitability analysis. Um, the carrying capacity data would then be inputted as an estimated capacity. The water or hydrology data we might have come across that or might have provided us with the water usage data and any other physical or existing land use research that we have that we have conducted previously may also generate, may also provide us with the building height and land coverage ratio data. Agricultural standards are separated from the main group because I think it's because the this particular group here um, is more concerned or is more concerned about physical development, physical construction, and so on, while agricultural activities have a vastly different have a vastly different have vastly different requirements and characteristics. So that's why it's separated. It's separated from this main cluster. Now, development constraints. Development constraints is identified or generated from the existing land use, um, from existing land use, and of course future plans for future development should have been considered when we conduct the carrying capacity analysis. And once we've mashed that all together, we get the land suitability, which will then be used to generate recommendations. Now, it may seem like a straightforward process, but generating a recommendation is um, not as simple as, all right, we found what the land is suitable for, what sort of development it's suitable for. Let's generate some recommendations. Unfortunately, it's not as straightforward as that, because right at the end here, there are a few other arrows that feed into the recommendations bit. We already have the physical aspects. We already have the physical data. We've collected it, and that is then fed into the land suitability consideration. And then just before we finalize our recommendations, we have to look at what development policies and what plans are there for future development. And then these recommendations are then represented on what is known as a land suitability map, which more or less looks like this. The darker shade or the stronger shade of red describes the urban centers, urban activity centers, or potential urban activity centers. And then the orange shades or the orange areas that surround the red areas describe urban settlements that support the urban centers, or that support activities in the urban centers. Other activities such as rural settlements may also be identified. And then we have here the white plots or the white zones, white areas indicate that these areas here are to be left as is, or to be maintained, or left as is, or to be maintained to a certain level. And then the green areas indicate that these are conservation areas that need to be maintained in order to achieve that that balance, so to say, balance between balance between unbuilt and built environments. Now, um, I mentioned before that um, like uh, like the like the sustainable development concept, there are three pillars in determining land use suitability. Now, these past slides that I've shown you have um, have been all about the physical and the environmental aspects, so to say. And what about the social and the economic aspects? Well, you do need to conduct um, economic characteristics at some point. However, the focus of this unit is on um, land use and land suitability. So that's why this session has been heavily oriented or heavily leans heavily towards the environmental and the physical aspects instead. However, I'd like to touch on the economic aspects or economic analysis that needs to be done before you to complement the land, environmental, and physical aspects of development. Some some economic aspects that you need to consider are potential resources. These potential resources have components such as location, any natural resources that are there, any potential man-made resources that may be there, and even human resources. And then, and then of course, the economic analysis, an analysis of the economic structure that's there, any 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 potential competitive sectors that could be further developed and so on, any potential commodities and um, the feasibility of or the economic feasibility of development. Are there any particular technological needs? Are there any particular infrastructure that we need to provide in order for this economic development to take place, and so forth. Um, this is just an illustration of the steps and the process of economic analysis. I won't go too deeply into that, but it involves identifying potential resources and then analyzing the economic, the regional and the local economic landscapes. Of course, as with any development that we are going to do, we need to consider government policies and so on. Um, and basically, the economic analysis is to determine whether there are any opportunities for investments, whether it is feasible to develop or not, um, and then any strategies on and formulating or recommending strategies um, on adding value to the to the current output or to the current product or commodity. And then we have the final component of the three pillars, the social aspect or the socio-cultural characteristics. Excuse me. There are several sociocultural indicators which are generated on a case-to-case or case-by-case basis, and then there are demographic, and then there are sociocultural aspects such as the demographic data, the level of education of, of people that inhabit the area. What about its labor force? What's the proportion of what's the proportion of productive um, of the of people who are in a productive age? Um, what are the proportions of people who are no longer productive, who are no longer capable of working, and so on? What's the health status, public health data of the area? Um, what about its housing conditions and the general housing and settlement environment, and other social cultural aspects, and whether these aspects then can lead to a potential for development, and then we select the development plans and policies that apply to the area to finally generate a recommendation. So this is an illustration of how these sociocultural, or how these demographic characteristic data come into play in determining not the physical, not so much the physical development of an area, but more to the social development, more to the social development side, the community development side, and so on. And I guess that's all. That's all I have. Uh, that's all I have for us today. Um, Once again, there's the QR code if you haven't already ticked off attendance. I know some of you are registered in the other class. That's okay. I've had a word with the unit coordinator for that particular class, and make sure that to make sure that that your attendance is catered for. Now, do you have any questions or comments regarding today's discussion? You don't need to use the raise hand feature. You can just, as before, you can unmute yourself, fire away.
Ask something, but it's not related to what you were explaining.
Hang on.
It's about the lecture that we're gonna have. Do you have any idea what topic is gonna be?
Wait. Sorry. My headset has decided. To throw a fit at the moment. I'll just switch to a different speaker. And hang on. Okay, can you please repeat that question again? Sorry about
Do you
that.
have any idea on? Okay, this question is based on the guest lecture which we're gonna have. So my question is, do you have any idea on what topic is gonna discuss with us, so that maybe we can try to research a bit about that topic? As he will be explaining, we might have an idea, or we might also generate questions in advance.
Right. Well, that's a very good comment. Unfortunately, our head of department and Pak Cahyono and Guruli only mentioned that Professor Nakamura will be presenting case studies from Japan. They weren't very specific on what case studies that would be. However, maybe if I reflect on these last few weeks where we had the global project-based learning, this collaboration that we had with SIT. he might be he might be talking about he might be talking about how Japanese cities adapted have adapted to the COVID outbreak situation, how they have reacted, and how they and what sort of measures they would be implementing in they would they would be implementing, and what sort of considerations they had for reopening public facilities, public spaces such as schools, restaurants, uh, and other services. It could be that. Um, However, since it's pretty vague, that's why I recommended that you have a look through his list of publications, just to see what's going on in the mind in the man's head, and to sort of tap into his previous knowledge, to foresee foresee what sort of content he would deliver. But I would to help you with that, I would talk to Pak Cahyono and Buruli, just to reconfirm what sort of topic would he be presenting, because if it's just general case studies, I think it's a bit too broad. It's a bit too broad for us, and I'll get back to you guys through the announcement section. Oh, that's right. And with that, hang on. I promised that we would have a brief. Oh, hang on. That we would have a brief tour, or a brief orientation into the question and answer section of our class. Hang on, just if I can get into our class. Right, that's there. Minimize that first. Screen. This one. Right. Just below course overview, you have the question and answer link. Now, if you click on that, you'll be directed you'd be directed to this page where you can submit your questions regarding the running of the course, or regarding the course contents, and you can also upvote any similar questions that you might have. So rather than asking a similar question twice or more, I would urge you to upvote a similar question, and the more upvotes a question gets, the more I assume the more urgent it needs responding. We can use this platform. To document and curate questions for Professor Nakamura before his before his guest lecture. But yeah, the question of what is he going to talk about is a valid question. It's a very good one, and I will get right on it very soon. And because and we may face rescheduling, because as I mentioned earlier, we will have the mayoral election on December 9th. I don't know how many of you how many of you have or are registered voters in Surabaya? I know I'm not. So that may have an effect. Um, that may have an effect on the scheduling of this event. But however, no need to worry about that. Um, we'll get that sorted. Now that's the question and answer thing, and I, we will respond through the announcements link, and of course I'll use the announcements link um, to announce any upcoming events or anything of importance or of relevance to our course. So I hope that very long answer answers your or addresses your concerns. Thank you very much. Any other comments?
I'm so sorry. One more thing.
Yeah, sure.
Do we have a deadline to submit the questions? And if yes, please get in touch or inform us as soon as you can when you speak with Mr. Chayono based on the topic that the guest lecturer is going to talk about.
Well, because the event status is still to be confirmed. I can't really confirm a firm deadline just yet. However, if we let's just say that the 9th of December is a go, then I would say 3 or 2 days before the event, we should get all the questions up. You know, we can curate the questions together, determine which questions are should be prioritized over the other, and so on. But yeah, anywhere between 2 or 3 days before. I don't think that it is very unlikely that the guest lecture event will be shifted forward before December 9th. It might get pushed back, but we'll see what happens. Yes, I will announce the final decision once it has been made. All right.
Thank you.
No worries. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Well, cool. If you don't have any other questions or comments, I look forward to responding and engaging in the online discussion. Padlet, I feel like I'm missing out because there are some really good stuff up there, and I do have some resources, some references up my sleeves that I'd like to use to respond to them. Thank you very much for attending this session, and I look forward to. Oh, and sorry, before I end this, Parudi sends his apologies because he had to. I had him on board. I almost had him on board this week, but he had to cancel his attendance because of another agenda which seemed pretty urgent. So unfortunately, he couldn't be with us today. But hopefully next week, especially in the weeks towards coming up towards the guest lecture session, he'll be able to make 1 or 2 sessions. Okay, once again, thank you very much for your wonderful responses. And thank you very much for attending the session. I wish you all a very lovely day. Well, in Surabaya, it's really sunny out. Yeah, it seems like it's going to be quite a wonderful day today. Have a great day, guys, and stay healthy. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Mr. Nanda.
Yep. Oh,
just hold on, please. Will you leave us online? I want to ask some. I want to talk to my friends. Okay, so you're saying that you would like to use this Zoom session. Yes,
okay,
yes.
that's the difference. All right. If so, I'll hand over the role of host to you.
Okay, sure.
But before that, I should just